Hello, friends. Nayaswami Hriman here. This is part 3 of my series, Why Does God Permit Suffering? I'm going to use my notes for the written version of this that's published on our website, Ananda, Washington, so that I don't miss any key points in this last three of last part 3 of 3 broadcasts. So we considered the necessity of the opposition of opposites so that the universe can be perceived and be perceived to exist at all, the ceaseless flux of good and bad and light and dark. In fact, if you were to really seriously think about a perfect world for you, how long would it take before you got bored or restless or even unhappy? We cannot imagine happiness without unhappiness being somewhere in the background. And so it is, those are the external or objective conditions out of which plus and minus, good and bad, happiness and suffering, joy and sorrow appear on the horizon or in our hearts in the experience of the human drama. Yogananda once commented that people don't get to talk to God openly. God does not talk with them openly because most people would just argue with them. Many people, if they went to heaven, would turn it into hell because they themselves are restless or angry and so on, filled with desires. And then I think of Adam and Eve, who, there they were in paradise, and it wasn't good enough for them. As they opted out of paradise, in effect, the different creation stories around the world tell us we did too. And in fact, in every life when we achieve puberty, we are just anxious to get out into the world and explore all the possibilities that seem to be offered to us. I suppose there's some people peering out ahead of them at that early point in life might be fearful, but there's plenty more who are eager to get on with living. So the basic reality that we have to confront is simply that suffering exists. Now, the law of karma, as it is taught, states that we are responsible for everything that happened to us. But I admit most people aren't ready to hear that. Instead, let us say simply that what we need to do is take responsibility for how we respond to the things in our life. And here we're talking about suffering. Now, a devotee will say that like Job in the book of Job in the Old Testament, and like great saints everywhere, St. Francis, for example, and our founder, Swami Kriyananda, also in his life, accept suffering as a gift from God. Now, you have to work towards that. At first, we try to respond even-mindedly to the difficulties of life. That's tough enough, especially with the big tests that come to us. But then the second level could be said to be accepting what comes to us with faith, with the intuitive courage and confidence and calmness that there must be some lesson there, some avenue, some doorway to greater self-understanding, greater acceptance of God's love, greater acceptance of the basic goodness of all that happens to us. That is a big step. Going on to being grateful for our tests is a lot to ask for most people, especially in the midst of their suffering. But nonetheless, the saints have showed us the courage, the heroism of being able to do precisely that. Jesus Christ at the Garden of Gethsemane and on the cross accepted what was the divine will. You can't say he did it joyfully, but he did it with acceptance and with faith that it was the right thing to be done, for he was, as he said, born for this purpose. You can say it's karma, or the devotee can say it's from God. Which do you think is more inspiring? And so it's always karma, I suppose, if you're strictly into law and justice, but it's so much sweeter to think that God is helping us in some way that may not seem evident in the midst of our suffering. But nonetheless, to say that it's coming from God lifts us above ourselves onto that plane where wisdom and love and transcendence can come. Here's the key point I want to make, however, that without suffering, we would never question, we would never seek the giver of life, and we would never seek the love of the creator of life. And so it is that the dice are loaded. Suffering is there. First off, it has to exist for the universe to exist, okay, but it's also a prod to our pride, to our soul's knowing that we are free from suffering, knowing that we have the power to transcend the knowledge of good and evil, to use the Genesis phrase, that we are one with the only reality there is, which is bliss, which is Sat Chit Anandam, ever existing, immortal, ever conscious, omniscient, and ever blissful presence, which is our birthright, our source, and our destiny. Now, Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, to those of you who have overcome the carping or complaining or resistant attitude, spirit, I reveal to you wisdom sublime. This is an important aspect of acceptance with even-mindedness of suffering, is that it awakens us, and especially when we see it as a divine test, a divine opportunity, then from that comes wisdom and grace. Sister Gyanamata was one of Yogananda's most advanced disciples, and she suffered greatly for 20 years because Yogananda kept her in the body so that in handling that suffering, she would be forever free. And she, in fact, called her suffering the pathway to greatness. Now, the Christians have overdone it. They have emphasized too much suffering. Suffering accepted as grace leads to the vision of God, leads to the experience of the divine presence. A great Muslim saint, Rabia, said in response to those who questioned her deathbed suffering, she said, he is no true lover of God who does not forget his suffering in contemplation of the divine beloved. The greatest saints see in God an acceptance of what God gives, the joy of God. This is the necessary balance to the otherwise grim acceptance of suffering, even acceptance as a divine test. That's not enough. We need to live a life in which we seek the transcendent state of the divine presence. And then when tests come, as they inevitably do everyone, we have the courage, the calmness, the confidence, and the faith to know that this is for our own highest